Hello, this is Deborah Yah with Black Education TV. And once again, I'm going to be discussing the film The Black Panther. Now, this time I'm going to be dealing with a subject that has surfaced. And the question was, why were light-skinned blacks not represented in this film? Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush on this one. I'm going to jump right into this subject. You can't honestly tell me that you don't understand why lighter-skinned blacks were not represented in this film. If we are honest with ourselves, we already know the answer to that. Now, we already know that this is a fictional film. There's no such place as Wakanda. Okay? We already know that. And the film was written in a futuristic manner. We know it was based on fiction, but there are some very true elements that were sprinkled throughout, okay? Now, as far as why light-skinned blacks were not represented, please don't tell me you don't understand the reasoning for that or the reasoning why you have lighter-skinned blacks in the first place. Colonization has whited us out, or lightened the gene pool. When you look at Africans in their original form, you can't tell me you don't understand where lighter-skinned Africans, or should I say black people, come from. Because even within the African continent, I remember there was a documentary, 100 Years of Silence, I believe that's the name of it, where one of the tribal women, she was trying to figure out why she had green eyes. Now, she had brown skin. She wasn't dark like your average African. She was more brown like most of us over here in the U.S., but she had green eyes. She was smart enough to know that those green eyes came from somewhere. And when she did research on her history, she found out that her great-great or her great-great-great-grandmother was raped by a European soldier. She realized that a child was born from that union, or should I say that encounter, and then it kind of went back into the black. And so some of those traits still remain, and she ended up with green eyes. She was smart enough to know that something was different about her and many of the other people that she saw within their villages. So for a person to say, why were light-skinned blacks not represented, when we know that the fictional town of Wakanda was said to be uncolonized? You know that if you watch Whited Out Part 1 or any part of the Whited Out series, you know that the lightening of the gene pool came as a result of the infiltration of the black bloodline by white European males. And so once the seed has been infiltrated, the bloodline changes. Skin becomes lighter and things look different than the original. And so I'm not trying to be insulting to anyone, because most of us that are over here have an interrupted seed line. We can't pretend like we don't know this. And so we shouldn't take offense if they are trying to portray a film that is said to be uncolonized, which means 9 times out of 10, the seed line was not infiltrated by outside seed or sperm from European males if they are uncolonized. So you can't expect to see shades of brown, lighter tones in an uninfiltrated seed line. Now, usually in the African culture, if you see someone with light skin, and I'm talking about pure Africans, not those that we see like those over here in America, even some in the continent or on the continent of Africa, where we have lighter skin tones or varying skin tones because of that infiltration. But usually when you have an uninterrupted seed line, you have people who look like the Maasai people, or how the Ethiopians used to look some 50 years ago. When you see Ethiopians today, they have these different features. Some of them are lighter, much lighter, and some of them have wavy hair and different things like that. But there was a time period where the Ethiopian people looked very similar to the Maasai people, tall, slender, very dark, almost black, because their seed line was uninfiltrated. But once that happens, it starts to dilute the seed line. And even when you marry back into the black, it's still very hard or difficult to get back to that dark skin tone. And so that question, to me, I know is born out of controversy, because there are many of our light-skinned brothers and sisters and middle tone or brown skin brothers and sisters like myself. I'm more brown skin, or in the mid range. I'm not light, I'm not dark. I'm kind of in the middle. We have to understand that something happened, and not take everything so personally, and not try to create controversy where there is none. History tells us what happened. History tells us how things changed. But what I was going to say earlier is that most of the time when you saw someone who had lighter skin was the result of albinism, where they looked almost white, but they were actually a so-called African person, but they had the albino syndrome, which made them look almost white. Many of them had blonde hair, and then the lighter color eyes, and the white or the pale skin, which was absent of melanin. And that's usually what we saw. If you saw any variation in color from the original dark skin. But after all these centuries of colonization, and the white male inserting his seed into the black woman, you have different shades of brown. And so, no offense to those that are brown like myself, or those that are lighter than myself, and those who are very light. No offense to you all in this, but there should be an understanding already had that Africans in their purest form were not all of these different shades. We're trying to trick ourselves into believing this, even with the Australian people. When you look at the Australian Aboriginals, many of us think about those that have that strange, I don't want to say strange, I don't want to sound insulting to them, but they have a different look about them, and many of them had blonde hair, okay? And so we trick ourselves into believing that that was a normal part of what they look like. But when you look at the last Australian Aboriginal, which her name was Truganini, this woman had coarse hair. Her family, we had images of her whole family. These were people who had coarse, natural hair, and they were completely dark-skinned people. They did not have that wavy blonde hair that you see a lot of the Aboriginal people having. If you watch the movie Rabbit Proof Fence, it's based on a true story, and it gives you a history as to why the people in Australia look the way they do. There was a process of bronchiamento, where they would go into the Australian lands, they would rape the women would give birth to children. They said that they were marrying them, but we know that's not what was taking place. They would rape the women, and once the children were born, they would take the lighter seed children, and then they would let them grow almost like they were breeding them. And once they grew and became of age, they would breed again with white males. And their whole idea was that by the third generation, there will be no evidence of black blood, because the white bloodline has been bred into them and the black bloodline has been bred out. These are their own words, their own admission. So we should not pretend like we don't understand why lighter people were not represented in this film of uncolonized fictional people. If you want to have a realistic portrayal, of what an uncolonized group of people look like. It's better to use people who don't look mixed or watered down or whited out or browned out or whatever. We have to be realistic in these things. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I say to myself, where is the rest of my melanin? and because we know, most of us over here, something has happened in our bloodline. Come on now, people. Come on now. I remember years ago, many years ago, I was a teenager. And of course, some of you already know that I was an artist. I am an artist, should I say. And I would paint pictures and do different things, different art. And this guy from Africa saw some of my art. And he asked me if I can do some things for him. This is when we lived in Michigan. I was still in my parents' home at the time. And I remember when the guy came to our house, he wanted to speak with me and look at some of my art and different things of that nature. As a matter of fact, he had a particular cartoon he was trying to produce, and he wanted to know what type of sketches I could come up with. When he came to our house and he saw my brother, we had a conversation about that. He said, now, you young man, he said, you look like you are pure African, because my brother's very dark. But he was talking about my brother's skin in a very positive light. He said, now, your sister, she's been watered down a little bit, but you look like you're pure African. He was praising the melanin in my brother's skin. And I remember thinking about that like, man, you know, I remember thinking to myself, where's the rest of my melanin? You see? So, yeah, to my brothers and sisters who were wondering why lighter skinned blacks were not represented, I'll say it again. If you're uncolonized, you're going to be darker. It's that simple. Let's not be offended over every little thing. Things happen, okay? And every movie can't be that way. I mean, when they did the movie about Nina Simone, now you all know how dark Nina Simone was, right? But who did they get to play Nina Simone? You see? More realistically, one of the women who played in the movie Black Panther should have had that role. But they gave the role to someone who was more brown caramel skin, but looked like they were mixed. I think they were, I'm not sure if they were Latina or what, but they definitely looked mixed. And so they weren't being realistic in that portrayal at all. But the writers of this film wanted things to be more realistic. So don't feel like you have to be included in everything, okay? Sometimes if you're trying to put forth a certain image and you're trying to make things look more realistic, sometimes you have to go lighter, depending on what you're talking about. Sometimes you have to go darker. You see, like in the Lena Horne, the story of Lena Horne. If someone did a movie or played the part of Lena Horne, you would expect them to look like her, correct? Now, one of the women who played in the movie Black Panther would not fit the image of Lena Horne. Come on now, people. It would look strange if either of those actresses, played the role of Lena Horne when you're trying to be realistic in things. I hope I didn't come off as offensive in any way to my brown or lighter skinned brothers and sisters. I wasn't trying to. I was just addressing a question that popped up to the surface, because this particular movie is amazing, because it is bringing about so many conversations, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You see, so many conversations, a lot of talk, a lot of discussion about this movie. This movie has brought to the surface so many questions and so many things that need to be addressed and talked about. I have so much more that I can say about this movie, to where I might spend some time on it. I see a lot of people are spending time on this particular movie, and there's so many different things to talk about. And I think one of the things I want to talk about is Killmonger. But that's going to be for another video. So with that, I will say Shalom, family.